The smell of roasted chicken and lemon oil drifted through the dining room, settling around the oak table like a perfume that didn't belong to me. I was halfway through setting the salad when my sister, Emily, looked up from her phone with that familiar smirk she saved just for me. Her heel tapped against the marble floor, a slow, impatient rhythm. "Adopted kid, go eat in the kitchen," she said, her tone sweet and cruel at the same time. "Don't bother our family." The words landed like a slap. My stepmother, Patricia, stifled a laugh behind her linen napkin, pretending to cough. My stepfather, Henry, raised his glass of red wine, nodding in silent agreement, as if she had simply said grace. My brother, Ryan, couldn't stop tapping his fork against his plate, grinning like this was a comedy act meant for him alone. Every sound in the room grew louder. The scraping of forks, the ticking of the clock, the whisper of winter wind brushing against the window. My throat tightened. I stared at the portraits on the far wall, glossy frames filled with smiles that never included me. Family vacations, holidays, and graduations, I had been cropped out long before the photos were even taken. I inhaled slowly. My hands didn't shake as I reached into my purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. I placed it gently in the middle of the table, between the butter dish and the bowl of mashed potatoes. "Open it," I said, my voice steady. Patricia blinked, confused. "What's this?" she asked, her bracelets clinking as she reached for it. "Something my real parents left for me," I replied. "You might want to read it before dessert." For a moment, no one moved. Then Henry took the envelope and tore it open. His confident face faltered as he unfolded the letter. I watched his eyes move across the page once, then again, slower. The laughter stopped. Emily leaned forward, impatient, while Ryan frowned, trying to read over his shoulder. "What is this supposed to mean?" Henry asked finally, his voice unsteady. "It means you've been caught," I said. Patricia snatched the paper from his hands, scanning the familiar handwriting. I recognized it instantly, the looping letters of my mother, Eleanor Carter. The woman who used to tuck me into bed with stories about Boston's brownstones and the sea breeze that would someday carry me back home. My real mother. The one who had trusted them to raise me after she died. Patricia's face drained of color. Her lipstick looked too bright against her pale skin. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "From the place my parents knew you'd never look, a bank box under my mother's name," I said. "It's a letter and a will. It explains exactly what was done with their money and how to get it all back." Ryan's fork clattered against his plate. "You can't be serious," he said. "Dad and Mom took care of you. You owe them everything." I let out a dry laugh. "Took care of me? You mean the money my parents left for me? The money they used to buy this house, these cars, those vacations? I was supposed to be protected. Instead, you spent it." Henry slammed his hand on the table, his wine glass toppling over. "You don't know what you're talking about." I met his eyes. "Then why are you shaking?" The chandelier above us swayed slightly, the crystals catching the light like tiny witnesses. I could feel every heartbeat in my chest, steady and sure. "My parents trusted you," I said softly. "They believed you would give me a home. But all you ever gave me was a reminder that I wasn't one of you. That ends tonight." Emily crossed her arms. "You're bluffing. You can't prove anything." I reached into my coat pocket and slid another sheet across the table, a notarized copy of the trust deed. "Actually, I can. Tomorrow your lawyers will see this too. The property in Boston, the shares in Carter Medical, and the remaining funds in the trust. All belong to me. And every cent you used can be traced back to this document." The silence was deafening. Patricia's hands trembled as she pushed her chair back. Henry muttered something under his breath, something about betrayal, but I barely heard him. I was already standing, gathering my coat. "You can call whoever you like," I said. "But the letter is real. The law will handle the rest." I turned toward the door. My steps echoed against the tile floor as I passed the staircase where they had once posed for Christmas photos. Without me, of course. When I reached the front door, I looked back one last time. Henry was pacing. Patricia was whispering frantically to Emily. Ryan had his head in his hands. The family that had spent years laughing at me now sat frozen in fear. "You always said I was lucky to live under your roof," I said quietly. "But that roof was built with my parents' money. So really, you were the lucky ones." I stepped outside into the cold Ohio night. Snow flurries drifted through the air, catching in my hair. The lake shimmered in the distance, dark and endless. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. As I walked down the stone path toward my car, I thought about the promise my mother had made before she died, that I would never truly be alone. She had kept her word. That letter was her final shield, the weapon she left me when I was too young to fight back. I started the engine and glanced at the glowing windows of the house behind me. They were still arguing inside, their voices muffled but sharp. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were saying: disbelief, denial, panic. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and court orders, truth and restitution. But tonight, I allowed myself one small victory. I drove away with the heater on, the letter safe in my bag, and a strange calm in my chest. The family that had stolen everything from me had just learned their favorite joke was over. The adopted kid they mocked at dinner had just taken back her name, her power, and her future. And they had no idea what was coming next. The morning after that dinner, I sat at my kitchen table in my small Lakewood craftsman house, staring at the folded letter that had changed everything. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. Outside, the air was cold enough to frost the window edges. I wrapped my hands around a cup of tea, letting the steam warm my palms as I tried to make sense of what my parents had done all those years ago, and what I was about to do next. The envelope had come from a safe deposit box in downtown Cleveland. Box number 317. Paid for every single year since 2008 by an account that my parents, Eleanor and Thomas Carter, had quietly kept alive at First American Bank. I had discovered it just 3 weeks earlier during a visit to Boston, when I went to see my mother's old friend, Ruth Dawson. Ruth's townhouse in Beacon Hill looked almost frozen in time, with its polished banisters, brass door knocker, and the faint scent of lavender that clung to her coat sleeves. When she opened the door, her eyes softened in recognition. "Anna," she said gently, "your mother told me this day would come." She led me to her sitting room, where sunlight poured through tall windows onto lace curtains. She pulled a small velvet pouch from the mantel and placed it in my hands. Inside was a tiny brass key, aged but gleaming. I turned it over in my palm, confused. "She left this with me," Ruth said. "She told me, 'Give this to Anna when she's ready to know the truth.'" For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The words, "ready to know the truth," echoed through my mind. My mother had passed when I was only 12. My father died the following year in a car accident on Route 9. After that, Henry and Patricia had taken me in, my father's cousin and his wife. I believed they'd saved me. I believed they'd given me a home. But standing in Ruth's living room, I felt something stir deep inside, a mix of curiosity and fear. I took the key, thanked her through tears, and promised to visit again soon. When I got back to Cleveland, I went straight to First American Bank. The manager led me to a private room and set the narrow box on the table. My hands trembled as I turned the key. Inside, there were 2 envelopes. One was labeled, "To my daughter, Anna," and the other, "Legal documents." The first was sealed with wax. I opened it and saw my mother's handwriting, elegant, slanted, and familiar enough to break my heart. The first few lines blurred through my tears. "If you're reading this, sweetheart, then you are old enough to understand that love and protection aren't always the same thing. We trusted the wrong people, but we made sure you would never truly be unprotected." She explained everything. Before her passing, my parents had transferred their Boston brownstone on Marlborough Street into a trust for me, valued then at $1,050,000. They had moved shares from Carter Medical Devices, my father's company, into my name and set aside a custodial account with $380,000 for my care. A separate life insurance policy worth $750,000 was also placed in the hands of my guardians, Henry and Patricia, who promised to use it for my education and well-being. They hadn't. They remodeled their lake house, expanded Henry's roofing business, and bought Emily a BMW when she turned 16. They told me there was never enough money for my college tuition, so I worked part-time through school. They told me the family house in Boston was sold to pay debts, when in truth, it was never legally theirs to touch. I could almost hear my mother's voice in that letter, patient but firm. If they ever misuse what we entrusted to them, the trustee will know what to do. Keep this letter safe. And remember, Anna, you are the rightful heir to everything we built. Never let anyone make you feel small for it. The second envelope contained the legal backbone of her words, a trust deed, notarized and sealed. It listed every asset, the Boston property, municipal bonds, and 51% of Carter Medical Devices. It named me as the sole beneficiary of a revocable trust that became irrevocable the moment my parents passed away. And it named one man as trustee, Daniel Whitaker, attorney, Columbus, Ohio. I looked up his name that same night. His office still existed. I hesitated before dialing, unsure how to start a conversation that would rewrite my entire past. When Daniel answered, his voice was calm and deliberate. I introduced myself and explained that I had found a trust deed and a will tied to my parents. I sent him a scanned copy by email. 10 minutes later, he called back. Anna, he said, this document is authentic. Your parents were careful. They left a legal trail that's hard to dispute. If your guardians misuse those funds, the law is on your side. I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat ached. So it's real, I finally whispered. It's not only real, he said. It's ironclad. We can reclaim what's yours. But we'll need proof of what they did with the money. Can you come to my office in the morning? Yes, I said, my voice trembling with both fear and relief. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long while, staring at the letters spread across the table. Outside, snow began to fall softly, coating the world in quiet white. The streetlights cast a golden glow across the porch swing that I had bought secondhand for $200, the one piece of peace I'd managed to carve out for myself. I thought about all those nights in my teenage years when Patricia had told me I was lucky to have a roof over my head, when Henry had laughed that I'd never make anything of myself without their charity. I had believed them. I had swallowed every insult, every small humiliation, thinking I owed them gratitude. Now I knew the truth. They owed me everything. I gathered the papers, placed them in a fireproof box, and slid it under my bed. I lay awake most of the night, replaying my mother's voice in my head. Her letter wasn't just an inheritance. It was her final act of love, her way of shielding me long after she was gone. When the first light crept through my window, I made myself a promise. I would not back down. I would meet Daniel Whitaker, gather every record, every receipt, every trace of stolen money. I would reclaim the life my parents meant for me. As I watched the sun climb over the frozen lake, I whispered the words my mother had written, "Never let anyone make you feel small." Tomorrow I will start proving just that. Daniel Whitaker's office in downtown Columbus felt more like a courtroom than a law firm. The walls were lined with heavy books and leather bindings, and the scent of polished wood mixed with the faint aroma of coffee. Through the window, the Scioto River shimmered beneath the morning sun. I sat across from Daniel, clutching a notebook and the worn copy of my parents' letter, while he reviewed the documents with the calm precision of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Anna, he said, removing his glasses and setting them on the desk, we're going to do this the right way. No anger, no chaos, just facts. Your parents left a strong paper trail. All we need now is proof of what Henry and Patricia did with the money. He introduced me to Lydia Collins, a forensic accountant with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She was quiet, polite, and carried a laptop that seemed to hold the secrets of the world. She smiled gently before diving straight into the task. We'll start by tracing every dollar from the trust account, she said. No one hides financial fraud perfectly. There's always a footprint. For the next 4 hours, the three of us went through stacks of bank records, credit card statements, and property deeds. The patterns were impossible to miss. Large withdrawals had been made from my custodial account the same month Henry's company, Lakefront Roofing and Gutters, paid for luxury renovations at their lake house. Patricia's name appeared on receipts for granite countertops, imported chandeliers, and spa memberships. Emily's tuition at Brown University had been paid directly from the same account that once held my parents' insurance money. Lydia highlighted each connection with ruthless efficiency. "See this," she said, pointing to a line on the screen. Funds moved from the trust account to the business checking, then to a private credit card. That's embezzlement. By noon, Daniel leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "We have more than enough," he said. "We'll file for an emergency injunction today." He drafted the motion in under an hour, typing with a speed that matched his intensity. The filing requested an immediate freeze on all assets tied to Henry and Patricia, personal accounts, business accounts, and the lake house itself. He also notified the trustee bank in Boston, instructing them to halt any transfer or refinance attempt involving the Marlborough Street brownstone. When he printed the final motion, he handed it to me to sign. My name, Anna Carter, looked powerful on that page. It no longer felt like a forgotten name hidden behind someone else's family photo. It felt like mine again. Within 2 hours, we stood before a judge in Cuyahoga County. Daniel presented the documents with calm authority, his voice even but commanding. The judge, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, read through the filings carefully. After several minutes, she looked up and said, "This appears well supported. Temporary freeze granted on all accounts pending further hearing." My knees went weak with relief. Henry and Patricia would not be able to move or hide a single dollar. The court required them to appear within 72 hours. When I left the courthouse that afternoon, the winter air felt different, lighter, sharper. For the first time, I wasn't the one being laughed at or dismissed. I was the one standing in the truth, and the law was standing beside me. 3 days later, Henry and Patricia showed up in court. I sat behind Daniel as they entered the room. Patricia wore a pearl necklace, her chin lifted like she was attending brunch, not a hearing. Henry's face was pale, his jaw tight. Emily and Ryan followed behind them, whispering to each other. When the judge asked for statements, Patricia went first. Her voice quivered just enough to sound rehearsed. "Your Honor, we never meant to harm Anna. We raised her. We spent that money for her benefit. She had a roof over her head, meals, schooling." Daniel stood and handed the judge a binder. "Page 15, Your Honor. The so-called benefits. That's a ski vacation to Aspen. Page 21, tuition payments to Brown University. Recipient, Emily Harrison, not Anna Carter. Page 34, a new boat. Title registered to Lakefront Roofing and Gutters, not to any educational trust." The judge's eyebrows arched higher with every page. Patricia's voice faltered. Henry tried to interrupt, claiming they had used the funds as family resources. Daniel didn't raise his voice once. He simply stated, the trust was not a family resource. It was a child's inheritance. Emily turned toward me, her whisper loud enough to carry. "You're destroying us, Anna. You're ungrateful." I looked straight at her. "I'm not destroying anything that wasn't already rotten." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge paused before continuing. When the hearing ended, the freeze order remained in full effect. Daniel filed for restitution, $1,240,000 in misused funds, plus interest, plus all remaining trust assets. The judge granted Daniel temporary control over the lake house to prevent further damage or tampering. By evening, I held the keys to the house I once wasn't allowed to sit comfortably in. I stood in Patricia's perfectly polished kitchen, the same one where I had once been told to stay quiet and let the real family talk. The marble counters gleamed under the lights. Through the large glass doors, the lake stretched out gray and still, mirroring the sky. I could have screamed or cried or broken something, but instead, I stood there in silence, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator. It was strange how quiet victory could be. I called a locksmith and had the locks changed. Then I called a realtor for an appraisal. The property, they said, could list around $820,000. It wouldn't be mine to keep, but it would help rebuild what had been stolen. That night, as I sat in the empty living room, Henry's number flashed across my phone screen. He had called 10 times before I finally answered. His voice was tired, cracking under the weight of pride. "Anna," he said, "we can work this out. You don't need to drag the family name through court. I'll pay you back, just give me time." I stared at the lake through the window. "Time already has a price," I said quietly. "You'll pay it through the court. Talk to Daniel." There was silence on the other end. Then the line went dead. I placed my phone on the counter, pulled my mother's letter from my bag, and read it once more. Every word reminded me why I was here. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. The next morning, I walked to the edge of the frozen lake, watching the thin ice shimmer under the rising sun. For the first time, I didn't feel like the unwanted child at someone else's table. I felt like a Carter, my mother's daughter, my father's legacy, and the rightful owner of my future. 2 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse for the final hearing, my heels echoing against the marble floor. The same courtroom that had once made me nervous now felt like neutral ground. Daniel stood beside me, calm as ever, holding the binder that contained months of truth. Lydia sat 2 rows behind us, her laptop open, the evidence neatly organized in charts and ledgers. Henry and Patricia entered together, both looking smaller than I remembered. Patricia's pearl earrings were gone, her face pale. Henry's suit hung loosely on him, his eyes hollow. Emily followed, her phone in hand, pretending not to notice me. Ryan wasn't there. I suspected shame had finally done what conscience never could. When the judge called the case, Daniel rose. His voice was steady, low, and clear. "Your Honor, this is not a matter of misunderstanding. It's a matter of betrayal." He presented everything: bank records, deeds, business ledgers, even the old receipts that showed how my parents' trust money paid for marble floors and lake house docks. Lydia took the stand next, explaining the numbers with precision. Every dollar accounted for, every lie revealed. Patricia wept quietly. Henry rubbed his temples. Emily's hands clenched her phone until her knuckles turned white. When it was my turn, Daniel gave me a nod. I walked to the stand, my palms cold, but my heartbeat steady. I looked at the judge, then at Henry and Patricia. "My parents trusted them," I said softly. "They believed these 2 would take care of me after they died. Instead, they used my inheritance to fund their comfort, to raise their own children while telling me I should be grateful for scraps. I was told I didn't belong at the table. But that table was paid for with my parents' money." The courtroom stayed silent. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. When I finished, I sat down. Daniel placed his hand lightly on my shoulder. No words, just quiet acknowledgement. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Anna Carter. Full restitution of misappropriated funds is ordered, including assets held under lakefront roofing and gutters, the lake house property, and liquid personal accounts. The defendant couple is also ordered to liquidate secondary assets to satisfy the judgment balance." I barely heard the rest. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. It was over. Daniel turned to me with a small, proud smile. "You did it." When I walked out of that courthouse, the air outside felt sharper, cleaner, as if the world itself had shifted to make space for me again. Later that week, Daniel and I met Henry and Patricia one last time at the lake house. The same home where I had once been humiliated over dinner now felt like an artifact of lies. The rooms echoed with emptiness. Their furniture was already tagged for sale. Patricia approached me, her voice soft. "Anna, I never meant to hurt you. We thought." I stepped back. "You thought you could keep me small. You spent my parents' money and called it kindness." I looked around at the gleaming kitchen counters. "My mother trusted you with my life, and you bought granite instead." She covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Henry stayed silent, staring at the floor. For a moment, I saw not villains but broken people, people who traded integrity for greed. But forgiveness wasn't my responsibility. Justice was. "I don't hate you," I said. I'm just done with you. I handed the keys to Daniel, nodded once, and walked out without looking back. Within a month, the lake house was sold. The net proceeds went straight into the restored trust, just as the court ordered. Carter Medical Devices, the company my father had built, finally transferred dividends into my account, money that rightfully belonged to his daughter. The Boston brownstone, once hidden behind legal tricks and false claims, was mine again. When I flew to Boston with a trustee to claim the deed, the winter air felt alive with history. The brownstone stood tall and proud on Marlborough Street, its brick walls glowing under the streetlights. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. The floors creaked softly, like a house remembering its owner. In the living room, I set my mother's letter on the mantel and framed it beneath glass. It wasn't just paper, it was proof that love could outlast betrayal. That night, I made soup in the quiet kitchen, the same kind she used to make when I was little. I opened one window to let in the sound of the city, and for the first time in years, I felt at home. By spring, I had rebuilt everything. I rented out the garden-level apartment for $3,000 a month, enough to cover maintenance and property taxes. My small Ohio house sold at a fair price, and I added the proceeds to the trust. Ruth came to visit one weekend, her silver hair glowing in the morning light. We sat on the porch with coffee, watching ivy climb the brownstone's outer wall. "Your mother would be proud," she said quietly. "I hope so," I replied. "She taught me to fight with grace." I hired Lydia to help manage the trust and set up a scholarship fund in my parents' names, the Eleanor and Thomas Carter Foundation, for children who'd lost their guardians to greed. Every dollar I put into it felt like another small piece of healing. I also started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I refused to let pain become my identity. My therapist helped me write a single rule I now live by. If someone laughs while they take from me, they lose access to me. I don't test that rule. I live it. One evening in May, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "It's Emily. Can we talk? I miss you." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Through the open window, I could see the garden, the soft glow of city lights reflecting off the ivy. I typed my reply carefully. "I wish you well, Emily. But all communication goes through my attorney." Then I set the phone down, poured a glass of wine, and set the table for one. A white plate, a linen napkin, a small candle. I didn't need company to feel whole anymore. As I ate, I thought of my parents, their laughter, their lessons, and their faith that love could survive corruption. They had trusted me with their legacy, and I had finally honored it. I wasn't the adopted kid anymore. I was Anna Carter, heir to my parents' courage, the rightful owner of everything they built, and the woman who turned their final letter into her greatest victory. The panic was gone. The pain had passed. All that remained was peace.